In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at how we can create and code our bsmash program. This is based upon a cookie clicker. The aim is we click this button and the counter will display what we're up to. If we inspect the current build, it's a little bit different from the previous tutorial where I've just adjusted the button, removed the simple image from behind it, and just changed the colors a little bit to make it a little bit more pleasing. But we want to change it now so when we click on the button, this occurs. Now to do this, we need to actually start coding in our Swift area. We'll be using the UIKit coding convention rather than the Swift UI. Now to get us some assistance, what we're going to do is select the main storyboard. And it's really important that you go up to the right hand side here and select the assistant. The assistant will open up another window. We can actually start closing down some of the other windows at the moment to give us some more coding area. We can still see the view controller on the left hand side here, or the interface builder, but it's important that we can actually see the individual objects because this is important when we create the program. Now there is a view did load, so once the project loads into the simulator, this is the very first function that runs. But if we want to talk to any objects on the screen, we need to be able to reference those. So display counter is a counter that's going to change every time they click a button. And because we want to talk to display counter, we need to actually associate that with our code. And our assistant will help us. Now, if you can't get the assistant open because you don't have that icon, sometimes you'll see it in older versions using the Venn diagram. So select the Venn diagram, and this will allow you to get to the assistant as well. If you select the object, hold down Control, click and drag, you can drag over into the view controller. You notice that it creates an outlet. We're mainly interested in the outlet, not the outlet collections. So keep it on outlet. We need to give it a name. Now there's different naming conventions you can use, but the ones that I use is going to be like a Hungarian notation with a camel case. So what is the Hungarian notation? Well, that's using something like LBL for label. And if we've got a text box out there, it's TXT. Buttons, we'll use BTN. You'll see a lot of that naming convention with Visual Basic, but it's under the developer principle of Hungarian notation. So we're going to call this LBL display counter. We're going to leave it as a UI label, and the association is weak. And we're going to click on connect. So what this has done is actually created a connection here with the object on the stage. You notice when this highlights on the dot, you can see the LBL display appear here. So I'm going to press enter there at the end of the line, and I'm going to do the same thing for the button. So I'm going to click on the button, hold down Control, drag across, and let it go. It's also going to be an outlet. It's going to be view controller, name, BTN, and we're going to call this clicker. And we're going to click on connect. Now I'm just going to remove the blank line so that these objects now sit underneath each other. I'll just move the override function down. I'm going to put a little developer comment in here and call this functions. That way it's a little bit easier. I'm also going to put a little comment in here and call this one outlets. That way we can see where our outlets, our links to the GUI finish and where our functions begin. Now because we have a connection between the outlet display counter and the information here, we actually want the program to show this as a 0 for when we're starting. So what I'm going to do is head down into this function here, press enter. So once it loads, I want to change LBL. And if you use the naming conventions, you notice it comes up in a list very easy to find. Press enter, so LBL counter dot text is equal to 0, and we're going to display that as a char 0, so it knows to put a 0 in the program. Now before I go any further, I'm going to test this. So I'm going to hit on play up here and then go to my simulator. Now once this loads, we should have a connection between our code and the GUI. And rather than showing us display counter, it should automatically load with 0 in the text area of display counter. Now, if your program doesn't work correctly, in other words, the display 0 does not appear where we actually had display counter, you may have the debug running, which is down the bottom here. you'll notice that there's a little blue bar here that turns these little breakpoints on, or checkpoints in your code. If it's not working, in other words, when you go to run your program, you end up with little commands like this appearing. Just click that off and also click on the continue program execution, and the program will run for you. The debug window is very, very useful, but sometimes it can be annoying if you don't want it debugging for you at the moment. So as you can see, it's actually changed that text up the top there. So once we've got that connection to the GUI interface, you notice that we're able to talk to the text part of that label because we've created an outlet for that. At the moment, we have a button click. So we can actually talk to the attributes of this button, but in particular, we want to be able to click on this and actually pick up the event trigger, the action that's occurring. And that requires us to make a different association. So let's head back to the storyboard. We have a button. I'm just going to close that left-hand bar again. But what we want to do this time is actually create an event listener for the button. This is going to occur in our function area. Once again, we're going to hold down Control, click on the button, and drag this down to the bottom. You'll notice this time underneath our connection, we've actually got action. We can still create another outlet for it if we wish, but we're looking for the action part of this button rather than its label part up here. So we're going to give it a new name. LBL is when we want to talk to a label. BTN is when we want to actually talk to a button. So we can actually call this BTN Clicker. And this is going to create an action controller for us. So event touch up inside, and it's going to be an argument ascender, and we're going to create connect. You notice at this time it actually creates us a new function, and it's called BTN Clicker. We've created an outlet up here, so we have an association with the button. Now we're also listening for if there's anything sent from the button. So if someone clicks on it and things like that. So let's have a look and see what we can do with this. Well, we want to set a button, so as we click on this, a number changes. So we can, every time they click, we can add 1 to that. Now to do that, we need to create a variable. And we're going to create a variable inside the class. So at the moment we have a class, and all this information resides inside that view controller class. So once we've done our outlets, we can then create global variables. Now in this global variable, we want to create a variable. Now I've done a tutorial on variables, so if you'd like more information, have a look in the link below. It will take you to that tutorial on declaring and defining variables. So in this case here, we're going to create a variable, but we're going to call it counter. And this counter is going to be of type integer. Now the reason why it's an integer is because it's going to be a whole number. You can't have half a click. So that's why we can actually call it integer. Now integer needs to have a capital I. I was hoping it was going to rectify that for me, but it didn't do that. We're getting some errors up on the right hand side here, and that's because I haven't finished this command line yet. So we declared a variable called counter. It's of type integer. We're also going to set its default value to be 0, so it's going to start at 0. Inside our function, we can now add 1 to that every time they click on it. So we're going to put a little counter here and say, well, counter, and I'm going to do it the long way, counter equals counter plus 1. So counter when it starts is 0, add 1 to it, and then store that in counter here. So counter starts at 0, when you click on it, adds 1 to it, stores it in counter. The next time you click on it, because counter's been changed to 1, it's been stored as a global variable, it'll be 1 plus 1, which is 2, and stores that in counter. But that's okay, that adds that to the counter, but we can't see that at the moment. So what we want to do is display this back in LBL display counter. So we're going to go LBL, once again, display counter is equal to, and before we can do the equal to, we've got to say, well, what about display counter? What do we want to talk to? I want to talk to the text part of the counter. Not the color, not the background, not its borders, its size, its position on screen. I want to talk to the text part. What's actually being displayed as characters in there. And I want to display in there counter. So I want to see the counter in there. Now you notice we've picked up an error. This error, when you look at the error, we'll talk about cannot assign a value of type int to a type string. Because LBL display counter is of a char, a text, we can't add an integer because we declared counter as an integer. So what we need to do is change counter to text. To do that, we can place this in brackets like this and put string to the front of it. So we can use a function and take the variable counter that holds an integer and convert it to string, and then we can put that string part, which is characters, into the text part, which is what it needs, is a string of text, and display that here. So let's have a look at our program now running. Once the program opens, I click on the button, you can see it turned to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the program will keep going as much as I click. So it's working correctly for us. Now we can add a little bit of variety to our program, and just to spice it up and make it more interesting, I'm going to add an if condition in there just to make the program a little more interesting. So I'm going to say, well, if counter, which is incrementing every time we click the button, if that counter is equal to, let's start with a small number at the moment, 5. What I want to do is actually change the background color of the screen here. So I can actually say, well, let's change the view dot background color. And I'm going to change it to a color. So I'm going to change it to a yellow, dot yellow. So let's have a look at this now. The program should change the background if that counter gets to 5. So let's build this app. The build has succeeded. I'm going to click the button. Now when it turns to 5, the background should turn yellow. There you go. So it makes it a little bit more interesting for the players. So we could add another if statement in there. And this time, rather than 5, let's change it to 10. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the background color this time to purple. But I'm also going to change the text color of the counter. So LBL display counter, I want to change its text color. And I'm going to make that white. And the reason for that, it should be easier to see. So let's run the program now. And let's get to 5. It changes. Oh, I've got a counter at 105. So on the next click, the background turns to purple and my text color of the label turns to white. So you can have a lot of fun expanding this program. And later on, if you want to, you can find out how many button clicks you can do in a minute, and you could involve some time, and you can push this program out to do some really cool creative things. So I hope you learned something new in this tutorial. If you did, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and also have a look around for other useful Xcode videos using UIKit.